Here we are towards the end of week 3, Psych 341 class, Learning and Memory. Our topic this week, well, set of topics, there's always a lot of them in such a short span. It included semantic memory, autobiographical memory, episodic memory, probably the types of memory that you conventionally think of as sort of the defining aspects of our memory. We often don't think of like non-declarative or skill-based memory to be an example of memory, because those things are by definition non-declarative subconscious processes. And when we think of those aspects of our memory that we consciously recall, events, what we did yesterday, what we learned yesterday in the case of episodic and semantic memory respectively, and also more broadly our autobiographical memory, the specific events, general events, lifetime periods is that three-part structure of autobiographical memory. Those are what we conventionally think of as probably our memory, our everyday memory that we have conscious access to. So that's been the topic, and the forum discussion, I thought I would just pull this really interesting finding in with people who have superior autobiographical memory. There's not a whole lot that's published on them because the research on them is relatively new. People like this have been known for some time. They've been recognized and but not formally tested and described in terms of what types of things they remember the best. Of course, it's autobiographical types of memory, but there's other aspects of their memory that's pretty amazing. And then also looking at the brain basis for that superior autobiographical memory. So you watch the 60 Minutes feature on them, and when that aired, actually, there had not really been anything published on them yet, but it was such an exciting and interesting finding that they got onto in the popular press before they actually had anything really published on them. Since that clip aired, there has been some work published on them. I've included a link to an article written by those authors. Larry Cahill is one of them who was featured in that film, a guy named Jim McGaugh, and the senior kind of lead researcher on the team, Aurora Laporte. In fact, Laporte et al. Is the article that they put on Moodle, in case you want to read more about them. And in that article, they really go into detail about, first of all, how they screened them out to make sure that they weren't just people who thought they had superior autobiographical memory or had some trick up their sleeve. Maybe they were all like memory magicians, like somehow they were able to trick the experimenter, however you would do that, into believing they had this. I mean, you got to go through those types of tests to really confirm that a phenomenon exists, even to make sure that you don't have make sure that you do have a true phenomenon like superior autobiographical memory. And they certainly seem to. They were able to screen out people who thought they had it and didn't really cut it. And then they studied these individuals who really did appear to have that ability across a lot of different domains, like that public events test. And if you look on some of the figures, some of the graphs in that study, if you don't read the whole thing, if you look at some of the figures, you'll see people with SAM versus controls, very, very different from each other in terms of how they perform. And yeah, it's not surprising. I mean, maybe you had the same reaction when I watched that. I think, oh my goodness, I mean, I couldn't even compete with them in a memory test. That's why they're called superior, I suppose. And so I think there was a lot of agreement in the forum discussions that it'd be nice to be able to remember that much detail. As college students, certainly were concerned with being able to remember stuff, right? Isn't that what a lot of it's about? And forgetting is maddening because it means that maybe things aren't going to go as well on a test or something like that. So we like to have as good a memory as possible in that context and in others as well. In my own, from this end of things, students ask me questions, and I'll know I've read that or I've talked about that in a previous class. That question's come up before. I was able to answer it, but I can't access it, and that from my end is pretty maddening. It's a nice thing about the online course. I can pause and think and come back and have that time, and not having to think on my feet as much in this environment, so it's a little more comfortable for me as well. So the downside, though, I think it was kind of a unanimous agreement, as is reflected also in the people that have superior autobiographical memory, that those memories for negative emotional events are very vivid and re-experienced when they're retrieved. And a traumatic memory is going to be very difficult to modify, let the emotional component of it subside for somebody with that ability. And and in a way, that's a great part about memory too, is the fact that we remember negative experiences because we need to learn from those. But then some of our negative experiences can be pretty bad, right? And we want to take care of take care of ourselves and our mental health, and hence therapy and being able to deal with some of those negative experiences and memories. And so being able to sort of take the emotional edge off of them is one thing that people ask of themselves and of a therapist if they're trying to cope with a problem that they're having from it's kind of a memory based context for their therapy, where they're dealing with maybe a traumatic event or series of events or something like that. As we've learned, you can't erase those memories, though people still are trying to use that term to describe what's happening in rat studies. Okay, there definitely is evidence you can extinguish memories or lessen memories, but they can also be recalled and retrieved, and they can have spontaneous recovery. And so what I'm getting at here gets us into what's going to be happening this week, which is the topic of memory in the law, and also amnesia and false memory, or memory and emotion, which you're going to see a lot of the subject matter is going to deal with what happens when our memory systems fail us and how that can happen. So, for example, imagining an event that never occurred, or imagining that's third person, or imagining having done something that never occurred, or forgetting the source of a memory. Did my mom say that, or did my dad say that? That's an example of a source memory, where you try to identify the source of the information, and that's an everyday part of memory. But failures of that type of source monitoring can become very problematic when you see the intersection between, or you look at the intersection between our episodic and autobiographical memories and the law. There's a chapter in the book that I'm assigning to you on memory and the law. In fact, the forum discussion is going to be based on that as well. You'll be reading about a researcher named Elizabeth Loftus, who does a lot of work in the false memory arena. A lot of students, just to forewarn, a lot of students will come through this part of the course feeling maybe a little bit put off, because they feel like there's all these memory researchers are trying to tell them that their memories are false, or that memory is so fallible that they shakes their belief in anything they've experienced or remembered. I don't want you to come out of the course feeling that way, but I do think it's important for students of the course to realize just how imperfect memory can be, how forgetting can occur, and how critically, not just forgetting, but misremembering information can occur, and how that applies to issues like legal issues. And there are a lot of cases that go back a few decades, where people had false memories, recovered memories, or implanted memories by irresponsible therapists of abuse, and based just on those recovered memories done in the context of therapy. There are a lot of lives, both emotional and personal, and also financially, that were ruined as a result of that. A lot of lawsuits happened during that time, and a lot of it had to do with memory, and a lack of knowledge and appreciation and application for what's known about memory. So this is the week where the rubber kind of hits the road. We take what you've learned so far and apply it to where it's really useful and meaningful in clinical areas, like in therapeutic context, also amnesias, Alzheimer's disease, and the application of memory and the law. So that's where we are this coming week, the final week of the term. So I look forward to getting involved with you in the discussion board, reading your posts, the forum posts, and wish you well on wrapping up week 3 and week 4, and this very quick summer term.